So my phone rings, I answer it. Hey, Shep, what's happening? He says, Doug, I crashed the airplane. I mean, it's kind of funny listening now, but it obviously wasn't funny at the time. I said, what do you mean? What airplane? He said, I crashed the Red Tail. I landed with the gear up. You what? I landed with the gear up. And in the background, I hear these sirens. And I said, where are you at? He said, I'm sitting in the airplane. And you crashed it? He said, yes. And those are sirens coming? He said, yes. I said, get out of the airplane. Call me back.
That's always an unfortunate thing, and you can be flippant and say you had a bad day at the office or what have you. And one of the things we do is when we fly these aircraft, we take it very seriously, and we take the not only the honor to be able to fly it very seriously, but operating the aircraft in a safe manner very seriously as well. And that day is one of those days that, we say often your bucket was full or you had a helmet fire, as we say in the pilot world. And operating that aircraft that day is just one simple check that takes 22 seconds to actuate had gone wrong. It had gone wrong for my operational skills, and I paid the price for it.
He had landed the airplane with the gear up, pure and simple. And nobody feels worse about it than Shep. And, we never make fun of people, at least I never make fun of people who have done that, because it's the old there but for the grace of God go I. To err is human, and he made an error. But I think what's really amazing in Shep's case was from the get-go he owned it. Shep stepped up from the get-go. He explained it. He took responsibility for it. And that's a big deal.
Well, when you have an aircraft such as the, Red Tail P-51, and as much as I fly that aircraft over the previous years to it, as much as I'm in tune to that aircraft as one of my own, I baby that aircraft, I take care of that aircraft, I nurture that aircraft, I'm with that all the time. So to have something that close to your heart and soul, to put yourself in that position, but put that inanimate object in that position you care so dearly about, for lack of better terms, it was close to being a shock. I was in utter disbelief. How could it be me? Why would I not do that? I know this aircraft. I know my checks. I know the system of the aircraft. How could I possibly have done this? And you go through that, self-defecation, beating yourself up over it, but then also you have the tug of dealing with an emergency issue. You have to rely on your training and stuff. So I recognize that we're in an emergency situation. Not only do you have to recognize that, I still have a job to do to save the aircraft as best I can and make sure I save life and limb and property as well. So going into that kind of ice mode and making sure you're doing whatever the balance of the checks and things are to make sure the aircraft arrives safely or on the ground, that you kind of go into that mode as well. And that's where I kind of rely on that training when you're trying to find some way to not justify, but trying to make rationale of what happened, that, hey, I'm happy to be here, I can recover from this, and what have you. That rise above sort of stick-to-itiveness, where I hope that starts to kick in a positive sense. You realize where it could have been, and that's one of those things you do have to fight, over to this day. You recant the accident or incident inside your head and what you could have, should have, would have done differently, and that tape definitely plays on a regular basis.
Arrived here, and of course it had been in a landing incident, and so the bottom of the airplane was pretty well damaged, and really the front end of the airplane around the engine and cowling was pretty well beat up. We had to make a lot of the parts on the cowling and cowl formers and some pretty complicated parts. Of course, those standard accidents like that, they never seem to damage the simple parts. It's always the complex parts that get damaged. We have a relatively young average age around here. It's probably, could be under 40 years old actually, which in our industry is pretty young. And so we have a large appreciation for the vintage and old techniques, and we really appreciate that, and we have a large interest in that. But we also have an appreciation and interest in modern technology, and because of our age, we're able to embrace that and employ modern technology to either replicate or accelerate the process that was used during World War II, because that preserving that process and that finished part and what it looked like is really important to us, and we know it's important to our customers.
Well, this is the radiator scoop on the Mustang, and it's an incredibly complicated part. It's got all kinds of compound curves in it. This up here, you can just see, I mean, the amount of aluminum stretching that has to occur to build that part's phenomenal.
One of the things we do is we'll take and splash a fiberglass template off of an original part, and then when we have a new piece of metal, we'll put that on the new piece of metal, and that tells us exactly where to trim it out, because that's one of the problems with fitting complicated sheet metal parts is knowing where to trim it out, because if you trim it out off center a little bit, you'll end up with a wrinkle or
Another piece of scrap.
Yeah, another piece of scrap. So we're making actually all the parts for a header tank, and we're able to repair these header tanks and essentially build them from scratch. The header tanks are a pretty important part on the Mustang, and they have a lot going on, as you can see.
So these are the swirl tubes, right? And their purpose is to...
So the hot coolant is coming out of the head, and you can see just by the shape of this,
Yeah.
the coolant is going to spin in here
Right.
naturally, and then it's going to go this way. As it's spinning, actually the air, you can see it on this side, is going to float to the top, of course, and be able to come down this tube, and then the air then comes out of this tube and floats to the top, and that's how the air is extracted. So the coolant level is here.
Yeah, there's the filler right here.
Yep, all the coolant that's in here would have the air removed from it.
Yep.
So by the Venturi effect down here, it's going to suck that
Right.
non-aerated coolant through the engine. In fact, it's interesting because if you look at the drawings, the very first header tanks that they put on a Merlin-powered Mustang were wide open in here. They didn't have this tube assembly, much like an Allison-powered Mustang. Or any other Allison-powered engine for that matter. And so they realized they were having an issue with air in the coolant system, and so they came up with this scroll type system. This is an original North American tailwheel assembly. They're made out of magnesium, so steel parts pressed into magnesium obviously
Dissimilar metal corrosion.
Yeah.
You built this part
Yeah.
out of magnesium?
No, we considered
Billet.
it, but we made it out of billet, yeah.
And how many other parts are left up in there? There's a big casting up there that attaches the airframe, right?
Yeah, there's another casting similar on top.
Is that magnesium as well?
It is magnesium as well. For some reason, it doesn't have as much problems as this one does, probably because this one is more in the elements, I would say.
If you think about how much work's been done to this airplane and how bad it was hurt, it hasn't been nearly as long as one might think. It's really come together really, really well and really quickly. What really caused the wheels to come off the wagon was the airplane veered off the runway as it was slowing down, and as the prop got into the dirt, rather than sliding on the pavement, the coefficient of friction between aluminum and concrete is considerably lower than the coefficient of friction between aluminum and dirt. So as the propeller got into the dirt, it dug, and that broke the front of the gear reduction off the front of the engine. And then the propeller went underneath the airplane, and one of the prop blades went through a gear well. And so that put a bunch of damage into the bottom of the wing, which was much greater damage than you would normally expect to see on a traditional gear up.
We had the manpower and the processes to get it done quick.
Well, and the parts are here. You guys have access, either have them in stock or have access to the parts. And, you got Eric on the phones and on the internet rounding stuff up before you need it, and that makes a huge difference. This is the second time I've flown this airplane on the first flight out of a restoration, and this one is not nearly as big of a project as last time, and not nearly as emotional. The last time I flew it, the guy that flew it before me was Don, and he perished in it, and so that was a a very emotional day, and his son Ben was there to watch it fly. You know, this is a lot more workmanlike here. This is, you know, the airplane's obviously had a lot of work to it, but I have a lot of confidence in the folks that have worked on it. I'm not too concerned about it. You know, the danger in flying old airplanes is you get all hyped up. You say, well, it's a first flight. We really got to be careful. The reality is you need to be prepared for a problem every time you get in the airplane. And if you take that approach to it, then this is just another flight. And that's the way we're going to approach it. And we're going to look forward to a normal flight with a normal landing. As it should be. It was just a pretty nominal flight. I mean, we just got some temperatures to tweak, and there's no way to do that without flying them. They're going to do some fit and finish work on it, but all in all, the airplane ran very well. You know, the engine, I think, is smoother than it was before. It's got different gears up front, so maybe these gears fit better in the old ones. I don't know, but it just ran flawlessly, so I'm really happy and ready to get it back out on the road for another season, telling the story of the Tuskegee Airmen and inspiring young people.
Congratulations, man.
I don't know whether you guys realize it or not, but there ain't another shop in the country that could have turned this airplane in this time. And you know, and not only that, we knew what your capabilities were. And last February, when we were hauling it home, Eric and Mark and Dave and I all took a piece of paper and we wrote down a date. And we all wrote down money, and we compared our money, and the dates were all within a month of each other, and the money was within 150,000. And we made our date. The dates went from Thanksgiving to New Year's, and the money was at the low end of everybody's number, and that's a tribute to, you know, the work you guys do here. It's incredible, and you're you know, changing this business in a big way. And on behalf of the CAF and the Red Tail Squadron, I just want to say thank you for getting us back on the road next spring, because otherwise we'd have missed another summer. Thank you.
Everybody just did a great job, and like Doug said, you know, and I agree. I don't know if anybody else could have done what we did. That's awesome. It feels good. I can tell everybody feels good too. So.
So really the whole bottom of the airplane, the doghouse, the lower cowl, parts on the side of the wingtip, those were all ground down to bare metal, and they were completely refabricated out of brand new metal. We didn't have to strip those parts. Unfortunately, we didn't want to paint half the airplane. We wanted to paint the whole airplane. So we stripped it all down to bare metal and start over from scratch from the paint perspective. The airplane is thoroughly disassembled. every piece that can come off the airplane, not stuff that's riveted together, but pieces that come off for inspection, and further than that, all the gear doors, we disassemble all of the pieces around the radiator housing, around the butterflies. All those pieces are removed, seals, composite parts, plastic parts, anything that's affected by the stripper is protected, and then a hydrogen peroxide based, environmentally friendly paint stripper goes on and pretty much takes the majority of the paint off. Then all of those pieces, all of that substrate has to go through a surface prep process where we get the remaining portion of the paint off and put the right amount of sanding scratch into the metal. You know, too fine of a scratch, paint doesn't like to stick to that. Too coarse of a scratch, it ruins the finish quality. So there's the right blend. 180 to 220 grit sanding scratch is really the surface that we want to get all of the aluminum to. Right here where that old Zeus fastener was, we want to make sure that that's smooth and leveled in.
Yep, we still got going around.
Little spot there around the rest of them. So all of these panels were painted first with the green primer, then applied the surfacing primer. Then we put, and then again, we're gonna sand that surfacing primer and bring that to a super smooth surface. We actually put a dry powder, a guide coat on here that allows us to see, we can start to see that orange peel start to come out. And I'm actually, with those few strokes, you can start to see where now you got the hills and the valleys, removing, keep on sanding to the point where we know we have a nice, flat, trued surface. The Warbird has all of these rivets and spot welds and this texture that's in here. It's desirable to have that showing through the finish at the end of the process. So we have to be careful not to put too much surfacing primer on here to fill all these. In the end, we want to see this rivet row of flush rivets, and this rivet row of protruding head rivets is desirable to see all of that. This is a gram scale. It goes down to 1/100th of a gram, which is pretty sensitive. So this is how much by weight we're going to put in of these different components to make the red. So we're shooting for 315.9 grams. Right on the money. And that's how we make P-51 red paint. Any of our projects, particularly something like this, our favorite day in the shop is delivery day. When the customer walks in and he looks at the airplane, he says, I can't even believe that that's my airplane. It's the reward. It's why we do this job.
It's a story that resonates with all Americans. Why does a farm kid from Iowa respond so well to a Tuskegee Airman? And the answer is because as a 10-year-old kid in school, had I told my teachers that my dream was to fly most of the significant bombers and fighters and transports of World War II, they would have said, you know, that's a really nice thought, Dougie. You just do real good in math and science and you'll be a farmer just like your daddy. But it's, you know, I did. I set out with this target on the wall and this desire to fly airplanes. A story about hope and opportunity. That's what they wanted, was an opportunity to fly and fight for a country that didn't want them. And with hard work, focus on a goal, believing in themselves, never giving up, and being ready to win, they did it. And they changed the world.